Have you ever prayed desperately for something only to have it go in the worst possible direction, to have things just absolutely fall apart on you, and for it to be a tragedy, not a joy?
That's amazing. That was awesome, dude.
Oh! There are pastors out there, and there is a theology out there, prosperity pastors like Robert Morris.
He reached in his pocket and he pulled out a check that was 10 times the amount.
And Stephen Furtick and the like would have you believe that if you behave, which is just code for following them, giving to their church, coming to their church, giving them praise and adoration, if you do all the right things when you pray, God will give you what you want. And if God's not giving you what you want, then you're not doing enough to praise and give to my ministry and my church. It's a horrifyingly evil and simplistic theology, and it is not scripturally based. It is the exact opposite of what Christianity ought to be. And the book of Daniel, believe it or not, has something to say about that. That's what we're talking about this week. Kindred UMC live show features adults discussing adult topics, occasionally with adult language. It may not be suitable for young viewers. Please use discretion before watching.
Hello all! Welcome once again to the Kindred UMC pre-recorded live show, coming to you not live but pre-recorded from my front room, aka Kindred Studio A. My name is Chris Hayden. I am the pastor of Kindred UMC.
My name is Ann and I'm the treasurer for Kindred UMC.
And my name is Andrew and I'm the lay leader for Kindred UMC.
As we have well established,
we've known this the entire time.
Yes. We are in the middle of our series on Daniel, the book of Daniel. Daniel all right, this is a numbers thing, so we'll see how it goes. Does anybody know when the book of Daniel was written?
You told us last time.
I did.
It was 3 and 6, but I don't ever remember which one's first and second.
I think it was written in 300 BC and it's set in 600 BC.
That's right.
There you
That's
go.
right. I mean, not exactly, but you definitely got the idea. Yeah, 3rd century, 6th century.
Like they're being destroyed by the Assyrians, I believe it was.
Yeah, that's when it was
and
written.
So they're writing about when the Babylonians are doing the same thing.
Yes, that's exactly right. And that's important because a lot of the story takes place in the court of King Nebuchadnezzar, who, that's not just the name of the hovercraft from The Matrix. That is a Babylonian king who destroyed the temple in Jerusalem and conquered the Israelite people. And that's when it's set. So that's when the story is taking place. And Daniel and his compatriots they're kind of nobility, they're Jewish royalty, more or less. And they are in the court of King Nebuchadnezzar because they deported all the people who lived in Jerusalem to come live in Babylon. And then the king kind of claimed the finest of the finest for his own court. And now Daniel and his friends they're part of the enchanters, magicians, Chaldeans, fortune tellers. And as I've said before, and I think this is the best analogy, they're kind of like the CIA for the ancient world. Because they didn't they did have networks of spies and things like that, but they believed that they could predict the future based on dreams and interpreting signs and that kind of thing. And so Daniel and his compatriots are a part of that court of people who can interpret dreams and predict the future. So that's going to matter. Each of the chapters in Daniel are kind of their own little self-contained stories, and then somebody kind of thread them together, to make one cohesive book. So this is a self-contained story, but chapter 2, where we are, is really big. So I'm going to cut out a lot and summarize a lot. And then I'm going to only read a couple of pieces of it. So
a quick reminder that we are raising money for Residing Hope, formerly known as the United Methodist Children's Home. They focus on a lot of things, but primarily what they do is foster care. And they are currently raising money for their back-to-school drive. Every cent that you give to this channel via the Venmo or the links in the description down below will go directly to that cause. And we're funded by an investment fund, so none of it goes to my salary or anything like that. It goes directly to helping children. Consider giving and give generously, please.
So we're going to start just right at the beginning, Daniel chapter 2, verses 1 through And they sound like this. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar is the king of Babylon. In the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed such dreams that his spirit was troubled and his sleep left him. So the king commanded that the magicians and the enchanters and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dreams. So this is the group that Daniel and his compatriots are a part of. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I have had such a dream that my spirit is troubled by the desire to understand it. The Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will reveal the interpretation. This is kind of the normal way you do it. The king would say, I dreamed of 5 calves by the river, and then they would interpret it for him. However, this is going to go different. The king answered the Chaldeans, this is a public decree. If you do not tell me both the dream and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. But if you do tell me the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards of great honor. Therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation. They answered a second time, let the king first tell his servants the dream, then we can give his interpretation. The king answered, I know with certainty that you are trying to gain time because you see, you see, I have firmly decreed. If you do not tell me the dream, there is but one verdict for you. You have agreed to speak lying and misleading words to me until things take a turn. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can give me its interpretation. So what do you make of that? First of all, what'd you hear? What happened?
Well, it sure seems like the king doesn't trust them very much because he's testing them almost.
Right. And what's the nature of the test?
They have to, I guess, read his mind is what he's expecting to be able to figure out what his dream was.
Yeah.
So describe the dream and then interpret it. Instead of being described the dream and then interpret it.
Yeah, you have to know the dream, and that's the only way we're going to be able to trust that your interpretation is correct.
Yeah.
And the implication here is that, he'll tell them the dream, and then they're like, oh, that means this. In 77 years, it's like, well, who knows if that's true or not? How do we tell? And there's kind of a little, there's an undermining in the storyteller's mind of like the way that these fortune tellers work, So he's and spoiler alert, Daniel's going to interpret the dream. And so he's kind of setting up this dichotomy, this little contrast between the fortune tellers who are false followers and the real true followers of Yahweh who actually do know magic, so there's a little bit of kind of fanciful fairy telling here going on. Spoiler alert, Daniel steps up because he's part of this tribe that's going to be killed if they can't do the job. And so he and his compatriots are like, all right, it's up to us. And Daniel says, okay, I'm going to interpret the king's dreams. I'm going to be able to do it. And he asks everybody to fast and pray and ask God to give me the correct answer to this question. And then he goes on to do it. So Arioch, by the way, is the guy who's been charged to execute all of the enchanters and magicians because they can't interpret the dream. Just because he's introduced him, we skipped over that part. Therefore, Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon, and said to him, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will give the king the interpretation. Then Arioch quickly brought Daniel before the king and said to him, I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who can tell the king the interpretation. The king said to Daniel, whose name is Belteshazzar, remember they were given different names. That's something we covered in last chapter, so go look at that. Are you able to tell me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? Daniel answered the king, no wise men, enchanters, magicians, or diviners can show the king the mystery that the king is asking. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has disclosed to King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen at the end of days. And then he goes on to give credit to God and say, I'm going to be able to interpret this, but it's not because I'm smart, it's because God is God. And then just to skip ahead again, he goes on and interprets the dream. It's interesting poetry if you like ancient literature. Like I highly recommend it. It's fascinating. But we're trying to get to the point here. And then at the very end of the chapter, after Daniel correctly tells him the dream and interprets it, all it is like, hey, this is what's going to happen. This is kind of one of the clues we have to know that it was written like 300 years later, because we don't actually believe in magic. We think the writer was writing in such a way that he's like, well, the writer knows the history, and that's how he interprets the dream, and also this is clearly like a story, fanciful fairy tale, the way the literature, and also the vocabulary is Hellenistic. It's like, this was written 300 years, like the guy who wrote this knew the history, and then Daniel correctly interprets the history of what's going to happen. So, okay. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, worshipped Daniel, and commanded that a grain offering and increase be offered to him. The king said to Daniel, truly your God is God. Your God is God of gods and Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries, and you have been able to reveal this mystery. Then the king promoted Daniel, gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over a whole province of Babylon and chief prefect. Gosh. Words are hard sometimes. Prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Daniel made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained in the king's court. So everything works out well. So here's the question I think that really matters. Do you remember what's important about King Nebuchadnezzar and why his conquering of Babylon or of Israel is so important? There's a really important historical event. It happens twice in history, and this is the first time.
The temple.
Right.
Yeah.
He destroys the temple. So, what do you know about the temple and specifically what's called the Holy of Holies or the Tabernacle? Do you know anything about that historically for the Jewish people?
No.
Yeah. So, and that fair enough. Good. This is Bible nerd stuff, so I'm going to Bible nerd out a little bit. So, in Jerusalem, where the temple was built, there's like layers to it. There's like courtyard, and then there's like the actual temple, and then there's like the Holy of Holies at the very center. And the Holy of Holies is where God lives, and it's where the Ark of the Covenant. You ever seen Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark? That's where it lives. The Ark, and that's 10 Commandments. Moses comes down with the tablets. Everyone thinks it's like 5 commandments and 5 commandments, the 10 commandments, the 2 tablets. No. Moses has both contracts. Because normally when you sign a covenant, somebody, like, you get a copy and they get a copy. But in the Israelite religion and in their relationship and their covenant with God, the Israelites keep both copies, God's copy and our copy as humanity. And that's what's in the Ark. The Ark of the Covenant contains both our copy of the covenant and God's copy of the covenant. And so that's where God lives. That's where God communes with humanity. And you would send a priest in, and if that priest even has like an impure thought, he would die immediately, and they would tie a rope to his foot and like drag him out. Like that's the understanding. So this is where God lives, and this is where God can commune with humanity. And Nebuchadnezzar destroyed it, took it away. Who knows what happened to the ark? The temple's been destroyed. Where is God? And that's the question of Daniel. Where is God? They've been exported, deported to Babylon. And the fundamental question of Daniel is God a God in Jerusalem, or is God a God everywhere? Will God be in Babylon? Will God be at work in Babylon? And the answer that the writer gives is not only is God at work in Babylon, but God is at work in the mind of your enemy. God is at work in the dreams of the king that destroyed the temple. And so this is a radical, crazy thing to assert to a people who have been conquered yet again. You know?
Yeah.
Like, God is not only at work, but he's at work in your enemy's dreams. Like, that's crazy. So, my question is, have you ever been surprised by where, like, have you ever, let's ask it both directions. One, have you ever felt like, where is God? I can't find God. And then two, have you ever found like yourself surprised by God is at work? I can't believe God was in that. God did something here that I wasn't expecting. Either one of those or both of them, like what comes to mind with those questions? I'm sure my dog in the background is annoying everyone. I don't know if it's coming through the mics or not, but he's on his last legs, so bear with us. What comes to mind? And also, I can go first if nobody has anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So the thing that always comes to mind for me is in the Methodist Church, pastors change. I was working for a pastor who I was very close with. We had a great working relationship. I felt really, not only like did I enjoy the job, but I felt like effective at the job. And it was like I was killing it. And I was like really doing good work and just awesome. Pastoral change happened. And all of a sudden, me and that pastor, he literally tried to fire me. He couldn't get me fired. Because of staff parish, which is basically the HR department of the church. I don't know how much is coming through the mic, but there's a lot of stuff going on right now. Lightning, dog dying, all kinds of stuff. He's not literally, anyway, whatever. Long story short, that ultimately led me to chaplaincy. And I did one unit, what is how we call it, of CPE, clinical pastoral education, which is basically I was a chaplain at Tampa General Hospital. Everyone who is required to do this, which I was, hates it. Everyone hates it. For some reason, I loved it. It led me then to do a residency, which was a whole year, and it was one of the most important and most formative experiences of my life. And if I could go back to that, that young man who was basically being like, I'm losing my job, this guy wants to fire me, this guy wants me out, and be able to say like, trust me, this is the best thing, this is one of the best things that's ever gonna happen to me. Like, I wouldn't believe myself, I wouldn't be able to identify that God was at work in that horrible, and it still was wrong. Like, don't get me wrong, I still, and that pastor and I we are now like, we've reconciled, we've apologized to each other, and it's not all him. I had some things that I needed to own to, like all of that stuff. But like, man, if I could go back to that guy, me, and tell me that, I would be like, get out of here. Like, shut up and get out, and yet it really truly was one of the most important experiences I've ever had. And it shaped me so fundamentally as a pastor and as just a human being. So like, God was in the mess. God was at work even in that horrible thing that I thought was happening to me.
I have a story that's very similar to yours, so I'm kind of copying here.
Okay, well, never mind then. And do you have it? No, I'm joking. Go ahead, please.
But so
we're all going to tell kind of the same story. That's part of it.
Yeah, that's true.
We all are going to be human beings,
Yeah. So for the viewers that may not know, I am an engineer. That's what I studied in college. But the path that I took to get there was a little weird. So in middle school, I actually took one of those career aptitude tests, and it told me I should be an engineer. And I was like, that's what I want to do. It told me to do it. Sounds cool. Pay is great. So I was like, that's what I'm going to do. So that was sort of like what I had my mind set on since like 7th grade. But then also in middle school, I started doing acting. I took a drama class. I took the, second level class, which was, a lot smaller group of people.
We did an improv night. That was. We should do that again.
It was a lot.
You were
of fun.
very good at improv. I was surprised. I was like, you're like a theater kid.
Yeah, very much a theater kid.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I continued doing acting in high school. Was in, I think, every single production that our high school did the entire time that I was in high school, either being in the stage crew or being in the show itself. And I fell in love with it. I decided that I wanted that to be my new career. I was like, I'm willing to take the horribleness that comes with it, where, it's not exactly steady income and all that kind of stuff. Cause like, I love it so much. And my parents are great people. They were supportive, if hesitant. They were like, you're sure that's what you want to do? You're setting yourself up for a lot of pain in your life if that's what you want to do. But if that's what you want to do, we will support you. And it got to the point where my senior year, I even went with my dad to New York City to audition for the NYU Tisch School of the Arts, which I didn't end up getting into. But, I was even thinking about, because I got into NYU, just not the Tisch School. So I was like, I'll go and just do my gen eds and then I'll reapply the next year. So this was what I was planning on doing. I was very committed to this. But also, around that time, we got a new acting teacher that was running the drama department at my high school, and he's a great guy, or at least he was at the time. I haven't talked to him in years.
We'll have to check his tweets.
Yeah, right.
But he did have a lot of flaws, and one of those flaws was that he did not know how to handle high schoolers, even a little bit. And so the acting program, as I'm sure you guys know, it has a lot of egos involved in that.
Yes, I've been one of them.
Yeah.
Only one?
I've been at least one of them.
Yeah, so it started to clash pretty bad. There was lots of drama in the drama department, lots of arguing, lots of pain. And, I found myself thinking, I'm like, it's my last year. I'm almost done with it. I don't have to deal with any of these people or any of this drama ever again. But I knew some people that had dabbled in, drama departments and acting careers outside of school. And, I had done my own research. And from what I found, that kind of stuff is not uncommon in adults that are in, fine arts as well. And so the more I thought about it, the more
it's
I was
not a
like,
maturity issue per se.
yeah. So I was just realizing that, this is something that I love, but I don't have to stop doing it just because I'm going to leave high school. And at this point, it wasn't feeling like something that I wanted to spend 90% of my time doing or finding some way to, because that's what you have to do when you're an actor. Like, you have to spend all of your time figuring out auditions and finding ways to get, your foot in the door and all that kind of stuff. And I was like,
it's a very eat what you kill kind of mentality.
It just wasn't feeling glamorous anymore. And so I realized in that moment that, this wasn't the right spot for me, and this wasn't where I was meant to go with my life. And so, this was towards the end of my senior year, probably February, maybe January of my senior year. So I'm getting pretty close to graduating, and I only applied to one college, which was NYU, and I got in, so I had a place, but NYU is very expensive. So if you aren't going somewhere, if you aren't doing something where going to NYU is necessary, it's a bad idea to do that. And so pretty much last minute, I talked to my dad, and he was like, whoa, this is a big change. Are you sure this is what you want to do? And I was like, yes. And so I applied to UCF, got in, actually got a great scholarship. And so now I'm an engineer, and I think it's great. And I still do acting occasionally. I'm not super into it, not as into it as I imagined I might be.
Andrew kills it at One Last Time from Hamilton. And it's my personal request every time we do karaoke.
But yeah, so I get to do stuff like that. I directed a show for Fringe Festival a couple of years ago. I was in a different Fringe Festival show in Tampa, a little bit before that. So I still get to do the thing that I like and, love, but, have a much more stable career.
I'm still hopeful that soon-ish we will be starting a worship band. Some kind of a musical element will be part of what we do. And I will be tapping Andrew for his not only his skills, but also his love of the game.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so that was just a moment where it's like things seemed so dark, but through whatever guidance there may be, God acting in that moment, it led me to have a life that I wouldn't give up for anything. So
I think that's a really good example, because I think a lot of people are looking externally for like answers from God or the universe or whatever, and I, in my experience personally, the best answers come, like, God speaks to the heart. Like, it's like, want what you want, be who you are, trust that your instincts are guiding you in a good direction. Unless you have objective, there are people who have mental illness whose instincts should not be trusted. Like if you have a shopping problem or a drinking problem or don't trust those instincts.
And your instincts can be wrong. It's not like God's guiding every single little thing that you do. But like,
there is something about being like, and it's hard to describe and it's hard to discern, but there's a different energy about like being true to who you are and being true to like, well, what's real and what's not. And what's real is, this is how I'm actually feeling about this. And sometimes it's counterintuitive, sometimes it doesn't make sense, but I've found that leaning into that and like kind of placing energy and trying to discern that voice, that internal voice, has led me in good, positive directions. So, and I think God speaks to the heart rather than like a message in the stars or whatever.
It's written in the sand.
Yeah. How about you, Anne?
Mine's similar, of course. I was a veterinary technician, and I was just about to graduate, and I started butting heads with one of the doctors that I'd been working with. We got along great for a while, but then I was starting to challenge him, I think he felt, because I would, we would be running a test, and you were supposed to take x-rays 3 hours after you gave this or whatever. And I was like, well, okay, we've got to time it this way. Oh, no, we got to do it this way. Well, guess what? We missed it. But whose fault was it? Mine. And I was like, wait a minute. But anyway, so like we butt heads, I got transferred to another hospital. Fine. That doctor hated me. She was super young to be a doctor, and I think that she saw herself in me a little bit and like was awful. I can remember there was a dog that came in and it had a big mass that had to be drained. And the dog was
Gross.
too weak. Yeah, sorry.
Please continue.
We had to physically hold him up the entire time she was doing this procedure. This is like a 50-pound animal that you're literally, and you have to be nice to it, right? You can't just like,
bite you.
You got to be nice. And it was 45 minutes. And there normally you don't have to sit there for 45 minutes. Somebody else would like, it's like CPR. You don't have one person doing CPR.
Right,
you rotate.
You trade out, yeah.
And the one tech kept saying, oh, hey, it's my turn. I'll take over. And the doctor, no, she's fine. She like insisted that I stand there for 45 minutes holding this 50-pound dog. I probably have major problems, and that's not helpful to them. But I remember, like, shit was awful. And then there was another doctor that did a relief with us, like 1 day a week. Everybody hated him, and I loved him. And he got along with me great. He had these crazy out-of-the-box ideas, and I'd be like, oh, man, I don't know how we're going to get this sample or whatever. He'd be like, watch this. And he'd get stuff that, like, wasn't supposed to get used that way or whatever, but it always worked. He always had these crazy tricks that he had learned in school or from another doctor or whatever. And I was like, this is fantastic. That was probably half the reason that I really got pushed into going to try. Why I was in Pensacola going to school is for pre-med. I was supposed to try to be a doctor. I was a dropout, by the way. But my husband graduated. Thank you, John. So
we wouldn't have Anne without the dropout. So.
That's right. But that was the thing. Like,
thank God for the dropout.
But I don't know if I would have been in Pensacola without that. I don't know if I would have found where I'm at today. Like, there's so many crazy things that led to that path, and that path has led me to this point here. And like, it's insane to think that like that very nice doctor was probably half the reason it happened. Because if I wasn't at that clinic dealing with her and going, God, I hate this, and like, I never want to have to deal with you, it was like, you know what, I should just be you.
So I think, ow, my stupid hip. I think my big takeaway from this is it's a little easier to look back and see how things worked out.
Yeah.
And my invitation from this story is, what would it be like for us to, like Daniel, be on the lookout for how God is at work even when we are in the thick of it? You know, you might be in Babylon right now, you know, you might be in a situation that is totally not of your own doing, not of your making, and you're in a situation where you are just beholden to the forces of the universe. What might it be like if we realigned our perspective and started to actively look for God at work even in those times, and how we can cooperate with it? Because I think the thrust of this story is that God is at work in those places, and when we find it and when we cooperate with it, God can do incredible things that will surprise us and things that will move us forward, and not just us, but in this story, Daniel becomes a blessing for even all of the city, all of Babylon. Like, Daniel gets placed in a position where he's able to help a lot of people, not just himself. And that's the potential of finding God at work and cooperating with what God is doing. So, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.